So the idea is that if I make the statement that all bodies are extended, then this is an analytic truth. It's not a synthetic truth. If I say that all bodies have weight, we have a synthetic statement because we've synthesized there predicate with the subject, and the experience is the third thing outside of predicate and subject that has enabled us to synthesize the two together. And the point of this is that all synthetic statements increase our knowledge, and the only way that our knowledge is ever increased is through synthetic statements. Analytic statements never increase our knowledge. They may clarify it. They amplify it, as Kant puts it, but they don't increase our knowledge. So synthetic statements are crucial. Synthetic a priori statements, or synthetic statements. Now we move into the problem of synthetic a priori statements. So there are a third class of statements that are both synthetic. As we've seen, analytic statements are always true a priori. Synthetic statements are always true a posteriori. But now, what about this third class of statements? Kant says, synthetic truths a priori. There is a type of synthetic truth that is true prior to experience. And a priori means not only prior to experience, but it also means that the statement is necessary and universal. It contains absolute universality. That means it's valid in all cases, and it's necessary, meaning that it could not have been otherwise than it was. So, all the truths of mathematics, he will say, are synthetic a priori statements. They are a priori because the truths of mathematics are always true prior to experience. 7 plus 5 equals 12 is true. You don't need to go. We know it's going to be true on the moon. We know it's going to be true on Mars. We don't need to go to those places to discover that 7 plus 5 equals 12. We know that it's true prior to experience. Always. Mathematics, therefore, have a universality and necessity about them. But it is also the case that he's going to make the argument, and he disputes with some other philosophers here, that mathematical statements are synthetic. That is to say that the predicate 12 has to be synthesized by adding 7 and 5. You have to take 7, you have to take the concept of 7 and the concept of 5, and the mind has to perform an operation of synthesis in order to arrive at the predicate 12 there. It's not something, you can't analyze 12 to get 7 and 5 out of it, or analyze the concepts of 7 and 5 in order to derive 12 from them. The mind has to synthesize them together. He does say that, so these are synthetic a priori truths. He does say that mathematics, especially geometry, does contain some analytic truths as well, such as the statement that A equals A, that the set is equal to itself. That's an analytic truth. Or that A plus B is greater than A. That's an analytic truth in geometry. But for the most part, mathematics, and especially geometry, is contained of synthetic a priori truths, such as the truth that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Is a straight line is the predicate that is synthesized here by the idea of a straight line. In no way can you derive shortest distance between 2 points from the concept of a straight line. The mind has to perform a synthesis. And not only is the truth arrived at there valid for all time, but it's universal and necessary. Now, of course, this very statement, no sooner did Kant utter this than non-Euclidean geometry came along just a few decades after him, with Lobachevsky and Riemann and Gauss, and began to undermine the very universality of these statements by saying that, well, if you put a triangle on a curved surface, then the three angles of the triangle no longer add up to 180 degrees. The Euclidean proposition would be the three angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. That would have the Kantian necessity and universality about it that is undermined by the fact of placing it on a curved surface. But I suppose Kant would come along and say, well, you've just simply modified the truth and you've changed it to the a priori truth that anytime you put a triangle on a curved surface, its angles add up to are greater than 180 degrees. That in itself is an a priori truth. That is to say, it's always true once you put it on a curved surface. So I suppose that's how he would resolve that. But nonetheless, the kind of universe that Kant is operating in here is the universe that is obsessed with infinite space, as Spengler put it. And as McLuhan put it, it's bound to the world of visuality, literacy, the Gutenbergian galaxy, the Newtonian world. And indeed, the laws of Newtonian science are another example of synthetic a priori truths. For example, as Kant says, the statement that every event has a cause is a synthetic a priori truth, although not in an entirely pure form, since you have to go out and find out what an event is in the first place in order to make the statement. But nonetheless, that every event has a cause is a synthesis because We can certainly think of an event happening without its necessarily having a cause. A cause is a different idea. So a synthesis has been made there between a cause and an event, but nonetheless, we know prior to experience that every event has a cause, and it is therefore a priori and meets the conditions of universality and necessity necessary to designate that statement a synthetic a priori truth, a truth that is based on synthesis and therefore increases our knowledge, but yet which is prior to any experience that we can have. So for Kant, not only mathematics are synthetic a priori truths, but all the basic fundamental laws of science, the Newtonian laws, the three laws of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The Galilean law of falling bodies, Kepler's laws, presumably of planetary motion, the law of conservation, that matter can be neither created nor destroyed. All of these statements are synthetic a priori truths. And Kant wants to know then how they're possible. How is it possible to have these truths? Because the other thing about this is that metaphysics now is also based in intention on synthetic a priori truths. Metaphysics presumes that its statements, number one, increase knowledge, and number two, increase our a priori knowledge, ideas that we already have about God, the soul, freedom, and immortality, and that it increases knowledge, and that metaphysics in intent, then, is also made up of synthetic a priori truths, truths that don't require experience for their validity. The only problem is, for Kant, the truths of metaphysics are undermined by antinomies and dogmatism. If I say that the universe had a definite beginning in time, reason can come along and say, no, it can propose the opposite. The universe did not have a definite beginning in time. The universe is infinite. And so the problem with metaphysics is that it's constructed of these antinomies, each of which is asserted dogmatically and prior to experience and is universally valid. But yet, by the very fact that they contradict each other, it is the case that because of their contradiction, these truths cannot have the same indubitability about them as the truths of mathematics and natural science do, the Newtonian laws. So something about them is different than in the case of science. So Kant wants to know then how and whether, how these synthetic a priori truths of natural science are possible, on the one hand, and how is it possible to have a science of metaphysics on the other. Now, the answer will turn out to be that there can be no science of metaphysics at all. That will be the answer. He'll give a resounding no. We can't have a science of metaphysics in the same way that we can be said to have a science of knowledge, of science, rather. And that will turn out, though, to be good news for Kant because it saves the truths of metaphysics from being tampered with by a science that has no business transgressing over them and pronouncing upon them with any kind of dogmatic authority. It has no business interfering with metaphysics. And so, no, a science of metaphysics is not possible, and for Kant this turns out to be a very positive thing, and the whole essence and upshot of the movement in German philosophy that comes after him with Fichte and Schelling and Hegel and Schopenhauer, they will run with this idea and also make certain fundamental changes about it. So we saw then that what the third thing that made synthetic a priori, or rather synthetic statements possible, was experience. Experience is the third thing that enables us to synthesize the predicate together with the subject. But in synthetic a priori statements, that third thing is no longer its experience, since they're true a priori. So what Kant wants to know then is the basis for the synthesis in the statement that every event has a cause, or that all bodies, that certain things happen to all bodies, such as action and reaction. What is it then that gives us the basis for synthesizing the predicate with the subject in synthetic a priori truth? So that's what he wants to know, and that's what he'll proceed to answer, and it'll turn out, to give a preview of it, that that third thing is actually the structure of the human mind itself. The way that it's structured brings to experience a priori categories such as space, time, and the categories of quantity, quality, relation, and modality that the pure reason brings to all experiences and confers upon them their a priori necessity, or at least the synthetic a priori truths that have been induced from them. It confers on them their necessity and their universality. It's the structure of the human mind itself that will provide that third thing that's the equivalent of experience in synthetic a posteriori statements. And so that's how he sets this up. And then in the next chapter, the transcendental aesthetic, he will proceed to suggest the first solution, namely the solution of mathematics to how synthetic a priori truths are possible in the domain of mathematics.